this kind of situation, going down in terms of how this should actually be played out. All right, some footnotes there for this one. All right, you can print the documents. Okay, and you'll look up here. They've got Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. They've got some data tracking. So you can look up here in terms of daily positives, different kinds of forms that you might want to have. Let's see if they've got a... I think they've got a check-in, check-out, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, this is the summary one. This probably won't be what I want. I should have. I know they have one on here. I just can't find it right now. Should have done this before. They have some examples. This one actually talks about how you can build an Excel document to summarize all the students that you have. All right. Questions, comments, anything else? Any questions you've got on? Oop, that's good. Knock off your... Any questions on that? I just wanted you to see this, get a sample of the different kind of websites that you have out there. Because people are having problems getting to it. Any questions on that? Has anybody used PBIS World? You've used it before? You found it to be useful? Okay. Yeah, there's lots of information there, and they've got other, you know, it oftentimes links you to other kinds of situations. So one of the nice things is there's been enough stuff done that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It really does have things that you can get into, that, you know, that you can see what other people have set up. And for setting up your tools, you've got the steps, and you can just break it down from there. All right. Questions, comments? How about questions or comments on the students that you're working on? Everybody feel good about what you're doing so far as coming up with some interventions for your case study?
One of the case studies, they talk about ABA. Are they talking about discrete trial? They talk about ABA in general as a...
Usually ABA, I mean, what it basically boils down to is that a lot of clinics have popped up that utilize low-VOS type approaches, especially for kids with...
Like a BB type of...
Yeah. Okay. So usually when they talk about ABA, it's actually that low-VOS approach for oftentimes children with either autism or very low-functioning kids in some cases, but they're branching out to everyone. They're supposed to have the knowledge of the entire field of applied behavior analysis. Oftentimes they don't. And it's like anything else. You can come to a very skilled, very qualified, very competent therapist to somebody who you wouldn't let them walk your dog on a weekend if you were going away, you know, kind of a thing. But it's hard to say what's going on, but you've got to be careful about whatever's happening, but it's being done well and being done with the right approach. All right? People feeling good about what's going on so far? So what you're doing is go back, someone will get you back in your groups. If you have not done so already, pick an intervention, develop an intervention plan for the student that you're working with. Then think about developing a tool for how you're going to see this intervention plan you've identified as actually being implemented with integrity, and how you're going to track student behavior to see if in fact it's effective. All right, have somebody be ready to report out. We'll go for a little bit longer, and then we're going to actually have you as teams talk about what interventions did you come up with. Tell us how you're going to track that integrity. Tell us how you're going to track how the student's doing. All right, so you're going to report out as a group. Make sense? Yes? Oh, okay, as a group. Okay, so when we break, come back over there. All right, any other questions for the group? All right, back to your groups. Thank you.
We picked Ryan, and we decided that we would focus on the social skills and the expressive language disorder. we're going to tie them in together by using social stories on how to make friends. And we want to start first with the general skills and then being able to build that over so that he can apply them in the classroom, since that was an issue. We talked about self-advocacy in the class. We would do that with small group instruction. And then we'd go into like the larger class environment. We were going to do a peer mentor from an older grade, possibly like an 8th grade student who maybe had the same issues, that could come and talk to them and say, okay, here's the issues that I had, if this is what you were feeling. And then again with that frustration piece, using the social media, so maybe like they could tweet each other or kick and say, this is what happened today, what can I do about it? And then it's more of an instant solution with a peer. And then, and then finding opportunities throughout the day where he can be a facilitator, an educational facilitator, take that leadership role. So one of the things we talked about was maybe allowing him to teach in the class. Now we've already pre-taught the vocab and the social skills, but then having him come up and help with part of the lesson. Because then he's getting that positive peer attention, then he'll say, oh, I'm picking, Linda, and then I'm gonna pick Alex, and then he's getting that more control over that social interaction and getting that positive feedback because the kids are going on to participate. And then also teaching strategies on what they would do when he was frustrated. And then the tools we were going to use was the fidelity tool. So we were going to do so for example, when he goes to like the social work setting or we're teaching the social skills, we're going to have, who is the supervising staff? What time did you pick up the student? What time did you start the group, end the group? When did you drop off the student? What was the group skill you were working on? What was the group goal? And when was the last time it was reviewed? So then that way, each time, they could review and say, okay, this is what we worked on, this is when we went. So we all talked about how when you pull a student, like you have to take into consideration, you can't say, well, I started the time when I pulled them, but you're not really working on that skill yet. So we're saying, what are the actual minutes that he's receiving towards that? Because maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe we're thinking we're giving him these minutes, but we're actually not. And then we were going to do the check-in and check-out, but we were going to individualize it so that we could show his growth. We were going to do the rewards, as you had suggested. And one of the things he'd like to do was read. So we talked about maybe he could pick a book to read to a younger class, or even in his own group, because sometimes they do the read aloud, since he likes to do it. Again, he's in this leadership role and he's getting that attention. And then for his check-in, check-out, we did half-hour increments, and we talked about initiating conversations with polite language. And then we had a scale of 0, 1, and 2. And then we would use classroom time. We have like a time in area where he felt frustrated. So we built into the classroom an area where like he could go to. So for example, put his seat in the back. So if he's feeling frustrated, instead of acting out to the whole class, he could go to this area, and maybe you had like, just like a relaxing area set up, beanbag chair, some kind of, stimming, manipulative, but an area where he can go. He's not going to get in trouble for leaving his seat, but he can go and just say, okay, I need to figure out what it is, and having like, okay, here's my little checklist of what is it that, why am I frustrated, so that he can then learn how to self-manage what's going on. And then we said we have to teach him how to use that cool down or time in area, and then for the reward for checking in and out. And then as a team, we would sit down and identify what constitutes that 0, 1, and 2. So 0 we thought would be he didn't do it at all. 1 would be he had 1 or more teacher prompts, and 2, did he do this independently? And then we would meet and review that with the teachers. I think we hit everything, right?
Okay. Comments? What do people think? What issues, what problems, what do you think is great? This is you're now your general ed teachers. Somebody's just presented this plan to you. What are you likely to say? What questions are you going to have? What concerns do you have?
Awesome. See you tomorrow when we review it.
How about 8th grade are going to miss my class? I can't let him go down there.
What's that?
How about 8th grade peer going to miss my class? I can't let him go down there.
Okay.
What if it's during his lunch period?
So,
Or sometimes early bird or after school club, passing period, because sometimes they go right by each other. They can just check in on their way to the lockers.
all right, so one issue is how am I going to identify that 8th grade student? All right, so one issue might be what time of the day can they miss? Do you have 8th grade students in your school that need to work on fluency in terms of reading or whatever's going on? Would taking 15 minutes to go down and read and work with somebody else be a way for them to actually practice fluency? Right? Sometimes, again, you're going to have to sell this in terms of how am I going to build on those academic skills. I taught high school, and I get lots of kids who, read at 4th and 5th grade level, and I don't care how low vocabulary, high interest the book is. You give a 16-year-old kid a 4th grade reader, they know you just gave them a dummy reader. All right. Now, if I just gave that to them and said, well, I'm going to work with you, I would get all kinds of backlash. If I said, you're going to go read to the 4th graders, here's the book. They would preview that book multiple times, so when they went to read to the 4th graders, they weren't stumbling over it. So if I really wanted this kid to read, I was much better having him take 15 minutes and go do something that I could give him the excuse to do it. And so, thinking about how am I going to build that stuff in. I've got an issue. So Ryan's going to go sit at that damn quiet area the whole day. He's not going to do squat in my room.
Oh.
Is that okay?
No, because we have a timer. So when he goes in, he has to set the timer. He goes in and we'll have his sheet where he's documenting that. And then we'll assess how often is it being used, is he using it correctly. Another thing is that we would like the teacher, this is one thing I didn't say, we want you to utilize that. So for example, if you're in the classroom and you see the kids are just acting not the way that you want them to, say, excuse me, I need a minute, and then you go and use it. You don't have to do the whole 5 minutes, but show them. Because I've done that before, and all the kids are like, what? And then you just sit there, you come back like, okay, thanks. Here we go, let's move on, so that they can see an adult, that sometimes we get frustrated too with them, and that we're going to use this area too.
Okay, so you're going to model it.
Yes, sir.
Taking 5 minutes away from all you guys. I love it. Okay. Other questions, comments, concerns? So I know that the social worker took this kid for 20 minutes. I know they worked on a skill. How do I know whether that, I mean, I guess I know that they met. What do I know about what they actually did, or how did what's going on?
It's supposed to be identifying the group skill and the group goal, and that should be tying back to
Say that
what
louder.
we put in.
Really loud.
It's the group goal and the group skill should tie into what is on here. So if we change what's in the group skill or the group goal, then the individualized check-in, check-out would change to reflect it. So we're showing generalizability from being taught the skill to utilizing components of that skill in the educational setting.
Okay, so you're tying it actually to the check-in, check-out.
Yes,
All right.
directly to it as a way to measure growth.
Okay. One thing, when they said that they had a rating scale 0, 1, 2, the big problem with that when you do that is making sure, and they did talk about that, they have to teach teachers what that means, because my experience is that you'll get some teachers that I don't care what they do, they're going to get a 2. I'm not going to fight with this kid, you get a 2. So, and again, there's nothing worse than trying to do something if it's not going to be meaningful. So you want that number to mean something. So, and oftentimes rating scales also get affected by that time of day thing. So if they're better at the end of the class, they're going to get a higher rating than if they're bad at the end of the class, even though they're the same behavior. So just some of those are the things that you just need to think about. Other questions, comments? All right, next group. Over here? Do I need to take this thing with me, or you took it back, didn't you? Okay. I'll let you put that in front of you.
It's a good learning experience.
I'm going to stand behind you because I've got a microphone.
Oh, sure. So we talked about Jacob. He has a moderate hearing loss and autism. We identified his target behavior as his frustration. His function for his behaviors is what we were talking about before, the escape and avoidance. He does things that can be kind of aggressive, like biting others, hitting himself, he leaves. So we thought about, we come up with a few little interventions, but we really talked about giving him a chance to take breaks throughout the day. And we thought about doing some picture card cues that he could choose. If you put on his desk a little Velcro strip with 3 different pictures on it. 1 picture is of a rocking chair for the rocking chair in the back of the room. 1 picture is of the water fountain so he can get a drink, and 1 picture is for the bathroom so he can take a minute. And basically what we're going to try to do is trained Jacob to use these pictures to indicate when he needs a break and where he's going. So he can sort of have control over, not just that the teacher's taking him into the hallway or the teacher needs to restrain him. He has some control over what his choice before he becomes too frustrated and leaves. And then we thought about doing the teacher doing monitoring, because it sounds like Jacob may be a little bit of a lower functioning individual with autism. So the teacher would need to do some monitoring to say, this is how many times during, the 9 to 11 time slot that he used his break pictures. This is how many, if during that time slot he didn't, he might get a little negative mark, but it wouldn't, that kind of tracking wouldn't be shared with Jacob. That's just for data collection. And then every time he used the picture cue, it says in here he likes stickers, he likes high fives. Every time he did use the cue, he would receive a sticker or a high five. And maybe if at the end of the week he gets stickers every day, he can get an entire little sheet of stickers to take home and have fun with at his house. So that's a bit of what we talked about. Do we want to share about the bins too, or? So Linda talked about because he also has frustration with activities he doesn't want to do, and he gets really upset when he has to work on something for more than 5 minutes that he doesn't enjoy doing. So we thought we could give different bins with different activities in them. So we would start with 2 bins in the beginning, and the first bin would have, let's say we're learning about math. The first bin would have a math worksheet that he probably really doesn't want to do, but the other classmates are doing that worksheet, so he's going to have to attempt to do that first activity. If he feels that his behaviors, or if he has displeasure with doing that activity, he can choose to move on to the second bin. And that second bin at first may have some things like beans to play with addition and subtraction, or something that's a little bit more fun. As his mastery improves with being able to choose or being able to work harder or longer on a previous activity, he'll get more bins to choose from. So maybe the next bin will have a puzzle in it. So you might have a sequence that he can follow throughout the day that he gets to sort of control what he is doing, but it would be subject focused. So at one point of the day, maybe all the bins have math activities. One point in the day, all the bins have science activities. So the teacher can still be in control, but he can have a little bit of control as well, if he's able to. So, and that monitoring would also be a checklist. Is he doing it? Is he not doing it? We would also have data collection. If he completes the activity, you've got the record of that completion. Even if it's not 100% correct, you still did it. So that's what we talked about with Jacob. And does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns?
Bins, which we have just because throughout the day, I don't know if you have to say up to 5 bins. That would save the
Yeah, I think we talked about maxing it out at 3 or 4, depending on the teacher. Ideal for probably this type of classroom setting is either co-teaching, or if there is an aide in the classroom or a paraprofessional, that would be kind of switched out. Obviously, this plan would have to work a little bit more accustomed to the teacher, but if it needs to be maxed out at 3 bins, then that's capacity. But at least he's still got limited choices.
And I think whatever teacher is teaching, because we talked about it being subject oriented, we still want him to be focused on what the subject is at the time, so that, and it still has just different things that are relating to math, or different things related to science, or related to, and we started out with just the 2, and then hopefully then move on for more choices.
And one of the choices would be with the group.
Yeah, one of the choices would be to be with the group doing what the whole class is doing. So if he chooses that he wants to, or is in the mood to, or would enjoy being part of that classroom activity, he can do that. Or he can pick another activity that's more solitary, depending on, that the ability to choose what's most productive for him at the time. And this is assuming that because it didn't have a lot of information about his functionality. So this is assuming that he has some self-monitoring skills or abilities, and that would also probably be part of tailoring the plan to his ability.
Well, and the initial thing that we talked about, they go combined. I think they're together. So the idea would be that he the escape thing, and if he needs the break, he can go away from the bins. It's all both at the same time. So you're giving him the expectation of, you take the picture, the 3 choices that he has on the Velcro. He could go to the water, go to the rocking chair, go to the bathroom, I think was what we had said, or whatever you decide. And then if you have a sensory room, like they were talking, whatever. Anyway, they go take the break and then come back, but then come back to the bin. So it's like both interventions are still the same goal, to decrease the aggression, get him to do more on-task behavior. So I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. So.
So if you were going to check on the integrity of this being implemented, what would be the components you'd want to look at to see if they're in place?
I guess that every day that there were activities in the bin, that the bin didn't get skipped, or that there were differing activities. And this could also be if the teacher is willing, and if you work with the teacher well, you can get like a lesson plan ahead of time to check and see, well, did you follow that plan? Did you follow, this is all very ideal. And I realize that, but that's the fun of it.
Well, we did say too, the checklist is to keep it as simple as possible. It's per period or subject, and all it is it check like yes or negative. What do we say? Plus or minus? So plus meaning yes, he used the bins. Minus meaning he didn't.
He eloped.
That was it. Or he eloped and didn't do what was told. But also, we went into detail in terms of how to teach a skill first. And we didn't get into that, but like at first the goal would be hands on hand, go over, grab the thing. This is what you're going to go get a drink of water. And then work with them on the bin. We're shutting the bin now because we're frustrated. I'm going to, so you're really doing a lot of hands-on teaching that skill at first. And then, gradually hoping that he's going to do it on his own.
And clearly he's got some aggression, some physical aggression, so that sort of crisis team plan part of what was in the handout might need to still be applicable or on hand if needed, because he's been biting, so that's still dangerous, so that still needs to have attention, but the first function of the plan would be the positive and control for him.
Questions? All right, a couple of things just that I know that the bin thing sounds a lot of work. One of the big issues that happens with a lot of teachers is as a student begins to escalate their behavior, they begin to forget that what I'm working on is math, and it starts to become the curriculum of control. You will do what I told you to do. And they begin to follow the student's behavior. So if the student then says, oh, this is a bunch of shit, you can't swear in my classroom. And then he tells her, you can't tear paper. And all of a sudden, we've forgotten that our goal is to get the kid to do math. And generally teachers look at their own behavior as was my comment reasonable? If the comment was reasonable, they think they're fine. The issue becomes not is it reasonable, did this get the student to move back down towards being calm and baseline behavior? Did my behavior accomplish what I was trying to do, get them back into math? And oftentimes by saying, all right, wait a minute, let's do this. And it's a different math exercise because oftentimes that escape issue may be a competence thing. I may know a kid can do this. Remember, I think the very first session, for those of you that have been long-termers here, the very first session I did, I think I asked one of you to sing. Remember that? And the issue, and usually I don't remember if the person that I asked here sang or not, almost 50-50 in a group of teachers, the person will or won't sing. If the person doesn't sing, it's not because they can't sing, it's because they're not comfortable with their singing. All right? And we get a lot of students, it's not a matter of whether they can or can't do the work, it's they don't believe they can do the work. And my perception is the editor of reality. If I don't think I can, I can't. And so, can I get you to come back down here and do this? Great. Okay, now let's move here. Now let's do this. And I can build that competence up, and we've done math. It's been a win-win. If we can help teachers begin to think of win-win, not I have to win. I want the student to be competent. I want to have them doing math.
when we initially talked about that, because we really, because the first thing was, wait, they're supposed to do the worksheet, or what about that science thing? That was somebody that's in the group, and I said, but the point here isn't so much, we need to get them to function, and function in that classroom and function, because at the end result is they're not going to get any work done if these behaviors are impeding it. So giving them the choice of the different bins, and maybe it's not the exact science project they're doing with the other kids, but if they're doing something science related, then your goal is that you got them to do something and they're not acting out with the behavior. And that was the idea that you had said. And I think the other point that we were talking about that we didn't say is that, especially this kid in particular who seems to have pretty significant autism, the other point that I know I was talking about, we talked about in the group, is that sometimes it's not a matter of ability for work-wise, but that outside stimulus and his inability to be able to be not distracted by his own sensory issues that are going on with the autism, is that we have to have that in account too. So it's not just the ability, and leaving that variable that some days, even though you know he's already learned the behavior, he may still need those prompts and still have less attention, not because of the learn, but because of these other outside factors that we know that we can't control. So, keeping that in mind as well.
Linda.
The other part, I don't know where to look. The other part of this.
Look at the camera and talk so they can hear you.
Yeah, right.
Don't worry about me. I'm just a microphone stand.
So the other part of doing the bins is that it has a clear beginning and end. And if the frustration is that they're leaving, we want them to be able to stay in the room and be done with the task in a way that doesn't distract everybody else from the learning environment. So if he can put the lid on the bin and know he's done with it and can move on, even though the class isn't ready, we might be able to de-escalate some of his behavior of all that eloping, and at least be in the room and not aggressive toward others, and then be able to increase the complexity of what's in the bins later after we get his behavior more under control.
How many of you work with students with autism as well as the hearing issues? What happens when you give a negative message to some of these kids? Is that great?
Good job.
Yeah, oftentimes we work with a lot of kids who are incredibly sensitive to negative messages. The one thing I would suggest, that if you've got a plus, don't put a minus. Nothing means they didn't do it. All right?
We weren't, it wasn't going to be in front of them.
Okay.
That was for our data.
Okay.
But to make it easy, it's just
Yeah.
one mark.
Yeah.
So we know yes he did or no he didn't. It wasn't for his.
Okay. So oftentimes you can build it just so that all I'm going to give you ever is positives. Okay. If there's nothing there, it means it didn't happen. You've still got information.
Stickers is what
Yeah.
we're going to give to him.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Other questions, comments? All right. Another group. Who'd like to go now? The all-powerful Mike. Let's go over to one of these groups. We're coming this way. Who's our reporter here?
Me.
You, right on the end. Good. Okay, good.
All right, we did Ryan. Now knowing he is a 12-year-old boy, have one of those. Middle school, so a very difficult age in the first place. So, and we looked at his behaviors, and although he had the 3 behaviors of like the teasing and harassing, and then he had the taking responsibility and the physical aggression, it seemed to us as though the more frequent one, which was the teasing, when, we're kind of reading into it, but again, you don't have the whole team in front of you, when he's getting corrected for your teasing, you're doing this, then that negativity comes out of the teacher. It probably becomes a more embarrassing situation for him. And then the behaviors escalate into, no, it wasn't me, I didn't, yeah, so that lack of taking responsibility, and then the physical aggression. So we decided we would focus on that teasing, taunting to kind of be more proactive in what we're teaching them. So
it's a gateway behavior.
That was what our assumption was, and then what it looks like. And although there's different reports of the principal and the whatever, they think it is the escape. Well, it's probably escape once you're getting in trouble for something. Yeah, I want to escape that. I don't want to be in trouble, so I don't want to be embarrassed from that situation. But it seems like the initial behavior is more gaining that peer attention. So we took that as what we're going to focus on, and decided we would do a few different things. First of all, a social group, so that he could learn the skill of gaining peer attention in a positive way, doing role play and videos to model that kind of behavior. And then we said using, if there is a situation where he needs some correction during the time, instead of calling him out verbally in the middle of a class, maybe just using a little visual cue, a card or something, some way of letting him know, like, hey, you can't be doing that, without calling him out and escalating those other behaviors. It also seemed like this happened more in unstructured environments. So some way of him having a checklist of expected behaviors when he is transitioning or going to PE or going to lunch, so he can self-monitor. And then when a breakdown occurs and a problem occurs, instead of him being called out, you didn't do this, he can go through with the social worker, mind you, is guiding it, what exactly where the breakdown occurred, what he did. So he's calling himself out. He's not having somebody else telling him what he did wrong. A check-in and check-out, maybe that's just periodically, maybe it's once a day, maybe it's every period. It depends on, on what the other teachers, because the other teachers are going to be, you're in middle school, you have how many different teachers. The teachers themselves in the classroom, we would say doing a weekly ticket program. So if 4 out of 5 days in math class you earned a ticket for positive peer interaction, and this is for the whole class, the last 5 minutes on Monday, math class would get 5 minutes of free time. And then on Tuesday, if you've done that, the same thing for science. So it's spread out. So at the end of one period every day, he'd be getting positive peer interaction time. And as far as the fidelity, putting it all up on a Google Doc and having all the teachers be able to share that document to say, yeah, on Monday he got it for math, on Tuesday this group got it for social studies, but whatever class he's in, like that's the class that's going to get this. Obviously it's geared toward him, but instead of calling him out on his behaviors from the past, making it a group thing. I think I got everything in there.
All right, comments?
So more simplistic than the other groups, but
Simple's good.
simple's good.
Questions, comments? Is having teachers report what they do a good way to check fidelity? Yeah, I mean, it might be a good way to say, to help remind them what's going on and to have some data on implementation. At least you've got better than nothing, but it's probably not really a mark, because have you ever seen a teacher do something entirely wrong, but they thought they were doing it right? Yeah, again, I don't think sometimes people get up to try to do something wrong, but I'll watch sometimes and go, whoa, all right? That had nothing to do with what we were trying to do here, okay? But they thought it was. They thought they were doing fine, okay? So you've got a reporting, but it's probably not a fidelity check, all right? You probably need to have somebody else, kind of that third party somewhere, checking to say, were the pieces that are supposed to be here, okay? That little sheet that she talked about in terms of, all right, I'm going to go to an unstructured, it's recess. Recess is a problem. I'm going to lunch. Lunch is a problem. Does anybody do anything like that? Some kind of a usually it's called pre-correction. All right, where you kind of go, this is what you're supposed to be doing. All right, so I'm going to let you know that before you get out there. You do that with a student? Yeah, how's that work?
It helps a little bit. It gives them those reminders just for those activities. So
Okay.
if it's done right and it's not the teacher, it doesn't come off as to the student as a correction before they even do something wrong.
Right.
It isn't, hence the word pre-correct, but
Right.
it's a way it has to be shared.
Yeah. And if I've got teachers really ready to reinforce kids when they're doing it right, so not only do I not get somebody jumping my case, this little bump here that helps me figure out what I should do, I'll probably continue to do that, and I get somebody's actually noticing this and making a big deal of it. That can be a real powerful tool. And we've got so much going on now with, like, smartphones and all this kind of stuff, and our kids usually have these. We're doing a lot of video monitoring or modeling where we're actually letting the kids see themselves do it, make just a little video clip, and we just give them the video clip. And they can just watch themselves do what they're supposed to do here as we're going out. Whatever's going on, it's on their phone, whatever's, and we can, or maybe it's got just a page that comes up that gives me my steps. But there's a lot of ways to do this. It can be very subtle, and for a lot of our kids, they really need that clarification that can be really powerful. Okay. Other comments, questions, concerns? All right, what time we got here? What time is it? 2:08. All right, let's do one more group, and then we'll take what?
The mic.
Oh, take the mic. Everybody's looking away. You guys are so good. Like, don't look at him. If you don't look at him, he won't know that I'm... How about you guys? Sure. Who wants to be the reporter outer? We got a winner.
We took Ryan.
Loud, really loud, like you're a teacher.
We took Ryan, and what we decided to do was basically target all of the 3 behaviors that were listed. And what we thought of was doing a check-in and a check-out with the beginning and ending being with a preferred adult. So that person would be a person that Ryan would have picked, and they would have a chart with his target behaviors of being respectful, responsible, and safe, and would then kind of discuss and role play what that looked like with his preferred adult in the morning before he went to class. Being a middle school, he may have many different teachers, including band, and so he would be then responsible for taking his chart to this teacher or that teacher. And based on that, every like 20 minutes or half the class, then he could earn a point towards some type of reward at the end of the period. And since he does have some difficulty with some ADD stuff going on, he could choose up to a 10-minute break time. If he chose not to take the break time, that's fine too, but that would be built into his schedule. So he would start to have some control over his day, as well as being able to follow the rules. We also thought, again, the free time would be used at his discretion, based on observations, privately talk with him about who he can and can't work with. And that could be done either with a preferred adult or with the teacher, classroom teacher, or with the social worker. If there wasn't a co-taught situation, then having possibly a one-on-one aide or a classroom aide come in so that he would have that opportunity with an adult at all times. We also talked about having him have a leadership role. That again, you're working on having him being able to accept praise, as well as him being able to utilize his skills with either the same aged or a younger peer. And he would need to be demonstrating, again, the respectfulness, the responsibility, and the safety in order to do that. We could also measure, too, if he's able to, let's say, just like with math, even if he's having difficulty in math, let's say getting his 20 problems done, if he can explain how to do math to this person, then we know that he's actually got the concept. Talking a lot about having him involved along the way, so he would be an active participant with coming up with a lot of these things and taking some investment with them. Using a lot of the I notice that you're on time for peer tutoring. I notice that, those types of things. Anything else that I'm forgetting? So that's kind of where we went with it, is kind of dealing with some of the non-compliance, with failure to take responsibility. Having that person at the end of the day also to check out with a preferred adult who can be his rah-rah team and say, yeah, this is what happened, kind of a thing, having a trusting relationship all along those routes for him.
And a check-in, check-out sheet can be a very, very powerful tool for monitoring the improvement of the student. So that can serve as your data. And anytime I can do something where that's being done, you're way ahead of the game. Right? How are you going to monitor whether this is actually all being implemented?
What would you say again?
How would you monitor how all this was being implemented?
By working together as a team, I think that the team has to pull together, so whoever is on this child doing these things is going to have to get together at least once per week. You can do some of that through the check-in, check-out process, because at the end of the day, then that would be collected. And then that person would then give it to the person who checks him in, because you'd want to process, how did yesterday go, what went well, how did you do that, can we reproduce X, Y, and Z for the day? And then one person obviously would need to be like the case manager that would keep everything together and then start looking at percentages.
Okay, so that will tell me how the student is doing in terms of my behavior as a student. How do I find out, for example, one of the things you say is that the teacher will let him have a break. Not in my class. Not right now. You got to finish that work, then you can take a break. How are we going to know whether somebody's doing that or not doing that?
Letting him have a break?
Yeah.
Monitoring, yeah.
That becomes that developing that tool to say, do I have good implementation of my plan? My plan is that if I'm frustrated, I can take a break. Do we ever have teachers who go, no, not right now?
But we also said that, you know, it would be important for him to be in a class with either a co-teacher or a paraprofessional to monitor that chart to see if he's even earning the time to choose if he wants a break or not. Because if he's not even earning it and just saying, hey, can I have a break?
Oh, do I have to earn a break?
Yeah.
So if I have to earn being frustrated?
Yeah, kind of.
Ooh, could that be a problem? I am really pissed off, but I haven't earned anything yet. What might I do? Probably going to. One of the issues is that usually if you've got a kid where you're building a break in, it's unconditional. I can take a break anytime I need a break. Now, here's the dilemma. I want to be on break all the time. All right? How do you keep that from happening? Okay? You know, and so those, and so part of the, like, I've had situations where I've said, okay, while you're on break, you're not earning points. Okay? I'm going to trap you in terms of, I'm going to make sure that the work I'm asking you to do to begin with is probably work you can do and be pretty successful with. I mean, even have to back off a little bit on my expectations so that you're going to be able to do this well. If you need a break, I am not upset. Obviously, you need a break. Go ahead and take it. I'm not penalizing you, but I'm also not reinforcing you during that time. Although initially, I might give a bonus reinforcement for realizing you need a break. So you're going to get 5 extra points because you realized you were frustrated, you asked for a break, great. But during that 10 minutes that you're off, you're just not, you're just in limbo. All right, and it becomes that issue of trapping that kid back into wanting to do the work and being competent and successful. And it really is that, that strategic use of self. I know I've used this term before. I think